I don't know the exact date, but in the summer of 1980, at the age of 7, I moved to Reading with my parents and my younger brothers. In those few 7 years, I'd already moved around several times, from Salford where I was born, to Newcastle, to Runcorn in Cheshire, and then on to Reading. I'm proud to have been born in Salford, although my time there was little more than a matter of a few months. I have vague memories of living in Newcastle, the snow in winter, bonfire night and starting nursery school. All quite vague and all a long time ago. My memories of Runcorn are slightly clearer. The house we lived in, the children who lived next door, Matthew and Andrew. Memories of starting primary school and learning to ride a bike. So when I moved to Reading and people would ask me where I was from, there was already a tale to tell. But what was clear was that I wasn't from Reading. I was from the north, and it was my accent that gave me away. I spoke different to everyone else. For the most part the same English, but different. My grass was Reading's grass, my under is Reading's under. And to add to the confusion, I didn't necessarily have an accent from a particular place. So this year marks the 40th anniversary of my moving to Reading. Over the years my family have moved away, but I'm still here. But even now, when I meet new people, they'll ask me where I'm from, and I'll proudly say Reading, but the accent says something, and they always follow up by asking, no, where are you really from?
So in 1980 we moved into Queen's Road in Lower Caversham. I started at Thameside in September. My teacher was Mrs. Farnborough. To get to school we would sometimes walk along the Thames promenade, under Reading Bridge, echoing her as we went, and then past the park with the paddling pool. My friends lived in Caversham, Matthew on Donkin Hill, Colin on Balmore Drive and David on Star Road. And I did all the things that children used to do in the 80s, spending hours riding my bike along the Thames or being in the Cub Scouts in 22nd Reading. I remember the centre of Caversham the days before Waitrose and far fewer coffee shops, with half-day closing on a Wednesday, and St Martin's Precinct, where the supermarkets was a Lipton's, and then a low cost, where the Iceland is now. In 1984 I went to Hydan in Emma Green. I was in Class 1F, and a few years later was put into Westhouse. The school was bursting at the seams, so it had temporary classrooms that had been there for years, but which couldn't block out the sound of Concorde flying over at 11 o'clock each morning, so every lesson would briefly pause. As I got older, I'd watch Arnold Schwarzenegger movies at the Odeon, buy records and cassettes from our price, and get my ear pierced at Cavaliers. I got my first Saturday job in Littlewoods, from Friar Street to Broad Street. Later on, I got a job in Tesco's in the Butt Centre, the store wrapping its way round from what is now Poundland to New Look. When it moved to Napier Road, I moved with it. My Friday night underage drinking would be in the Griffin, before the mock beams were on display, and when Courage Best was less than £1 a pint. A few years later, we'd head into town, perhaps the 3Bs of the Rising Sun. I would go to midweek sixth form parties at Nino's nightclub on Bridge Street with people who are still some of my closest friends.
In '95 I moved back after a couple of years away at university, living up in Woodley, having to get the bus every day to work at the Prudential on the King's Road like so many others. In '97 I bought my first flat on Southcote Road, just round the corner from Elm Park. I was in my mid-20s. Saturday night I'd drink in the Rose and Thistle, sometimes, perhaps too often, going to the After Dark and Success. I worked for the council, working in the Civic Centre, a dreadful building, first on the 3rd floor, then on the 10th, but great people. And I remember celebrating the millennium with a dozen mates all crashed on my floor before I walked up to Prospect Park to see the sunrise at dawn.
In the years that followed, I married and had a family, and my son was born in the Royal Berks, and I'm proud that he was born in Reading, although I do remind him that it's not a city. We moved on to Elm Park the year before, hallowed ground to some, and I remember as a teenager I'd sometimes go to games, standing in the Tyler stand on a wet Tuesday in November to see a 0-0 draw against someone like Brentford. Keith Curle, Michael Gilks and the great Trevor Senior. I have to admit there are things about Reading I haven't understood or done. I don't remember anyone calling Woodlice cheeselogs, and I've never been to the Reading Festival. I have been to Hayling Island, but I'm not sure of the attraction. Perhaps most radically, I think the Kennet is more important than the Thames to Reading. The Thames is a boundary, but the Kennet is right at the heart of the Thames. Over the years I've tried to help Reading people, volunteering for organisations like No. 5 Youth Counselling when it was on Sackville Street, Cody Primary School or Sue Ryder, trying to give something back to Reading and hopefully making a difference. More recently I've just moved outside the town centre where Huntley and Palmer's was, on the other side of the Kennet from Mandela Court, where my teenage friends would buy their weed.
There's a scene in the Ricky Gervais movie Cemetery Junction where the main character is having breakfast with his family and he says if he leaves now he could be in Paris by 12:30. His mum replies, "Why would you want to go to Paris? There's parts of Reading you haven't seen yet." Well, I've seen lots of Reading over the years. Lots has changed. But I feel I've stuck by it and it's stuck by me. I know that it's far from perfect, but to me it's underrated. What I think some people miss is that it's a town where sometimes it feels like half the people you meet were born here and the other half, like me, just turned up one day and have never left.
So I'm pleased to mark 40 years in Reading and feel it is the place that I'm really from.